Hello and welcome to episode number 94 of Killer POV. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rob G. from Icons of Fright. Sitting to my left is Elric Kane.
G'day, mate.
Why it has already begun.
Oh, yeah, you can't even get to Rebekah's introduction without
I'm
you.
wearing my New Zealand All Black jersey today because it's our first Australian guest. That's the reason. I couldn't just be steamrolled. They just have more charisma than Kiwis, and they just are always more successful.
This is all true.
So I needed something.
I'm glad you said it. I'm glad you said it, not me.
Okay, Rebekah McKendry from Fangoria.
Hi. Thanks for getting to me.
And we're gonna introduce our guest right off the bat, a filmmaker that a lot of people, everyone listening to this knows at least one of his films, whether it be The Howling 2,
which is probably
or
the most
The Howling
mentioned
3. We've been talking a lot about Communion lately because
I've been watching all my Aliens films.
Her Alien films.
I think Communion was one of those earliest films that scared me. Like one of those films that came on TV and really unsettled you. I think because it said based on a true story.
Yeah.
Right.
And as a kid, that just means it's true.
That's how this guy got you.
Yes.
This week, as I've been continuing my trek through all my Alien films, I got Communion off Netflix, and my mom was immediately like, "Oh, that one's really scary."
Yeah.
So yeah.
Back when Walken gave serious performances.
Right. We're going to find out about that. And The Beast Within as well is another one. Welcome to the show, Philippe Mora.
Thank you. I've just looked at my credits on IMDb, and I'd like to meet myself.
You're pretty snazzy.
I also like that you have probably like 20 films after those films, but we're like limiting our interest to this early little filmography.
He was saying to me on the way here how interesting it is that in particular your genre pictures are the ones that kind of keep coming back or at least getting attention again. I mean, Howling 2, for example, is about to get a Blu-ray again. And I mean, is this kind of surreal and weird for you? That
Well, it reminds me of something that Arthur Ross, the late, great screenwriter, said to me. He wrote The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And he said, I need a station wagon. So I agreed to write that script. And he said he never for a moment thought he'd ever hear about it again.
Yeah.
And so I've needed a couple of station wagons over the years, and there you go.
Wow. And that's what happened. And I mean, again, one of the main reasons I wanted to bring Philippe on the show is I escorted him to the Howling 2 commentary for the upcoming DVD, and we were just chit-chatting in the car about movies, and I'll never forget, you turned to me at one point, we're stuck in traffic, and he turns to me and he's like, "So Rob, I don't mean to be rude, but what do you want to do with your life?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Do you want to like produce or what?" I found it so charming that I was like, "Oh man, I got to have Philippe on the show because he'd be a lot of fun with us." Just right through it, and then we were commenting on billboards. Like last time it was 50 Shades of Grey. This time I managed to snag a picture of it, I think. We were talking about how much they can get away with on TV these days in terms of violence and gore. And just as we were saying this, we passed this ad for water, which is like pretty much a fully nude woman in Hollywood.
I need to see this.
And we're like, that's for water? I can't believe it.
Like just regular drinking water?
Yeah,
that is for drinking water. It is
water
a naked woman on all fours in
What's
Hollywood.
the tagline?
I can't even see it. Hold on, I'm blowing this up.
I got thirsty immediately.
You got wet.
It worked.
Thirsty.
138 water. Oh wait, the fresh race of all natural. The fresh face of all natural.
Well, yeah. I wasn't reading it.
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah, honestly, the water part's secondary.
Right, but yeah. So no, I just thought, I just love Philippe's personality and enthusiasm for film, and
there can't be a lot of Australians who originate from France. Like the idea of a French and an Australian hybrid is kind of like a New Zealand's worst nightmare. Something between Rainbow Warrior and cricket and rugby.
All I can say to you is murky Beaucoups.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
So we're going to include him in the conversation, and we'll talk a lot about some of your films and some of the stuff coming up. But
did you know he has a connection to one of our other guests? I found out from IMDb trivia.
Oh my God, what is this?
If this is even true, it said your father, not stepfather, your godfather was Marcel Marceau. Now this could all be a lie. The famous French mime, is it?
No,
true?
it's 100% true.
Okay, good. Well, Tom McLaughlin, I guess, was his. Trained under him. The director went out there and trained under Marcel Marceau.
The brief version is my Marcel Marceau and my dad were in the French Resistance together.
Wow.
And they used to dress up as nuns and take Jewish orphans across the border, pretending they were Catholics.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Marcel Marceau, this is extraordinary. I'm going to do a film about this. Marcel Marceau used to mime to the kids to keep them quiet. Literally, he had to mime for everyone's life. So as I used to say to Marcel, no wonder you're such a great mime. I mean, we'd all probably be pretty good if we had to mime for our life.
Our lives, yeah.
Holy smokes.
So he would visit us in Australia, where he toured Australia. He was an incredible guy, incredible man. When he was like 84, he was already beyond a legend. But I'd meet him backstage. The last time was in Beverly Hills. I think it was at the Geffen, and all the Hollywood stars were lined up in the dressing room behind, to meet him. So Jim Carrey and everybody was there to meet the great Marceau, and he sticks his out and he goes like this, waves me, and I go, yeah, fantastic. I walk past all these stars, but that's not the point of the story. The point is, he closes the door and he says, "Well, what did you think? What did you think of the show?" That's what he cared about. And so still at that age, 82, 83, what was it okay? Was it okay?
Wow.
And did you see the new bits? Do you recognize the new? I mean, it's just amazing. Anyway.
And if you want a good French Resistance movie, because people don't give the French Resistance, Army of Shadows by Jean-Pierre Melville is one of the best war films. I like blew my. I only saw it a few years ago. It's like tough.
I agree
like
with
one
you.
of the roughest war films I've ever seen. And it's one of those little subparts of history you often don't know about.
Wow.
I don't, Anyway. So that's
Crazy.
So now we have a connection between two of our guests.
Wow,
Marceau,
and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of little.
There's a lot of
stories
Sybil Danning
like
flashing.
This guy can't
These
wait.
guys are both of them are like Sybil Danning addicts.
Well,
so.
let me just clarify. When I had Sybil Danning on this other show I used to do called Inside Horror, I was very excited to talk to her about Howling 2, and she sits down and we're on live internet TV. I don't remember if you were there or not.
I don't think I was there for the Sybil Danning
So I'm
episode.
sitting there and I'm very excited to see her, and she sits down wearing dark sunglasses
right.
inside. And I'm like, already off, kind of eccentric. And then for the next 10 minutes, she refused to talk about anything except a new sunglasses line that she was the major sponsor of, and you could not get her off topic. And it was just, I was just melting, like in front of the cameras, just going, oh, God.
That's funny, because in Howling 2, the AD came to me one morning and said, Sybil can't shoot. She's got conjunctivitis. So I went into the dressing room and she said, conjunctivitis. She says, I can't shoot, Philippe. I said, yes, you can. Just wear sunglasses. And she said, well, but the scene's inside. I said, well, you're the queen of the werewolves. You can wear whatever you want.
Yes, sure,
and she says, hey, okay. And so she wore sunglasses for the werewolf orgy. And anyway, it was such a good look that they used that for the poster. And ever since Howling 2, every horror movie now has people, either vampires or werewolves, wearing glasses inside. And it's all because Sybil
had pink eye.
Yeah, it's all with pink eye.
Oh, that's really funny. And that's probably why she was wearing sunglasses inside when I met her.
Wow.
Look at that. We're solving all our issues.
Holy smokes.
I feel like this is therapy for
Everything's
for
coming
horror
full
nerds.
circle right now.
Yeah, this is great.
All right, we're going to fill in a lot of blanks, but let's get to
discuss what we
well,
said.
actually, really quickly before we do what we saw, I had two things I want to mention. Number one, the day that this airs, just because I don't want to save it for the end of the show. Thanks to Bekah, no pressure on me or anything. Tonight, I am hosting a screening of the documentary That Guy, Dick Miller.
And he's going to fucking rock at it.
Hopefully.
will.
Dick Miller will be there, along with his wife,
Wait, that's because of me.
Lainey,
That's because of me.
Elijah Drenner.
Oh, yeah, because he asked me who would be good, and I said you.
Oh, thanks, guys.
He asked me the same question.
Well,
I CC'd Rob on the email, so Rob saw.
he asked me on phone, he went to Real Friends first,
listen.
and then he went out to his ex.
Oh, my God. Now I'm going to have to kick you under the table.
Anyway, the point is you got the job. Well done.
Great. So
Is it unpaid?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
all these things are.
Because they're always paying for host jobs.
That screening is tonight, Friday, March 6th at the Downtown Independent. Come on down. We've already talked about
film,
great documentary, and they're all going to be there, and we'll have a good time chatting about it. So that's number one. Number two, I just wanted to make mention of
the article.
Todd Farmer's Badass Digest article, which I thought was really, really brave and beautiful, and I mean, even people's that listen to this, they might think that we're in a different position
well, they think
than
we're
we are.
Insiders because of where we live and because we interview people, but that would also mean you got paid and had some influence or power, which we do not have.
No.
And we don't. And I read the Todd Farmer thing I told you about. Everyone was seeing it that day, but I saw it really early.
Yeah.
And it moved me deeply. I actually, I could identify with a lot of it, especially things with running a business and having to always put forward except to your close friend, an air of success or that something's good and fun when inside you are suffering deeply and you're 2 steps away from being a homeless person, which is what he's saying. He went from, Hollywood, almost A-list really, as a screenwriter to living in his car. And those steps between those two things were only a couple beats.
Yeah.
A divorce, looking after your kid, that kind of stuff. So I could really identify with it without, and I wrote to him, and I think a lot of people wrote to him personally.
Yeah.
I thought it was really brave. And I mean, he's also writing coming out of that, which is important.
Yeah.
It would have been kind of almost too depressing if he was still in his car writing that.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
But if you haven't read it, you really have to check it out because it's a really tough town, even for the successful.
Yeah. And I thought it just shined an interesting light on just how hard it is to follow your dream, your path, whatever it is you want to do, whether you want to write. And I mean, Todd's a friend of the show. He's been on, and I really applaud him for writing that. So.
Yeah, it was great stuff.
Yeah.
There's a great writer called Charles Hyam who wrote a lot of books about Hollywood, but I always remember this sentence he wrote about what Hollywood is, apropos what you're saying. Mm-hmm. He said, Hollywood is a clump of shacks at the end of a poisoned rainbow.
That's kind of
I like that. That's going to be our title for the episode.
Clump of shacks.
No, I mean, it really is different because we get so many listeners from smaller parts of America and other countries who really probably, just like us, has a very utopic idea of probably what LA or Hollywood or the scene even is. Mm-hmm. Some of them might not, but I bet a lot of you do, and it really isn't like that. Oh, no. There's nice moments where we're all friendly and we all get along and go places and see movies and stuff, but in reality, it's a very strange place. It feels like a non-place. Michael Mann's movies always felt the closest to what LA was because he shoots in all these non-places. He shoots in like back alleys and like parking lots, and I'm like, oh yeah, now that I live here, I kind of understand what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And because there's no LA, I don't know where it is. It's a strange place anyway.
Yeah,
but yeah.
So there's that.
Not to be completely dour.
Yeah,
it drags down there, Elric.
I love movies about Hollywood, like Sunset Boulevard is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille.
Oh, yeah. The Player.
And how long have you been here for, Philippe? You've lived here in Hollywood for quite a long time, right?
Too long.
I've
been here since the mid-'70s.
Wow.
Do you go back and forth to live? Or do you actually live here permanently?
I live here. Oh. I've lived here. When I first arrived, I stayed at the Chateau Marmont Hotel, which wasn't trendy at all.
I was going to say, that's kind of fancy.
Well, no, it wasn't at all then. It was where Europeans stayed. It was funky. And I was working on Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, a documentary about the 30s. And I had to watch, I was researching the film, so I wanted to see every Shirley Temple film because she was the biggest star at the time. So I hired a projector, and I was watching Shirley Temple movies for 3-4 days. And the concierge finally asked me, said, look, there's no problem or anything, but, we get a lot of strange people here, but we're all asking ourselves, why are you watching Shirley Temple movies? They thought I was a real Aussie pervert.
Yeah, that's funny.
So I explained it, and it was all cool. But Hollywood was very different then. In the mid-'70s, 8 million. There was a census. I think 8 million people came into LA between 78 and 88 or something. Yeah. Like a biggest influx of people in a major city in history.
Which also times with the origins of the blockbuster. Mm-hmm. So Star Wars and Jaws happened right around then. Then people probably all thought, oh, blockbusters, big money, Hollywood,
Exactly.
Moved out here.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't just filmmakers. There's Silicon Valley, there's everything, but it's an extraordinary city. It's sci-fi. It's a sci-fi city, really. It's Blade Runners. It's coming true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you go downtown, it's Blade Runner down there.
Oh, yeah. It's quiet. You go on a Sunday. Go on a Sunday to outside where the Disney Center is and stuff. It's just no one. There's nothing on the streets. There's no cars.
Places down there. When I was getting ready to buy a house, my realtor was like, "You get a 4-bedroom loft condo downtown for super cheap. Yeah. You should go look." And I went and looked on a Sunday to a couple open houses. It was frightening. There was
it's weird.
No one there.
And then Skid Row's weird. And somebody was shot in Skid Row yesterday. They killed a mentally ill
French guy.
Yeah.
Turned out to be French.
Yeah.
But you know, you can get a very good apartment in Baghdad now, apparently, with a great view and everything. So it's all happening.
A lot of genre stuff being made.
Yeah, it's really.
All right, so really quickly, what did everybody see this week?
I think good stuff. Well, we all saw The Beyond at midnight.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
We don't need to necessarily review it that much, but me and Rob's learned something about midnight movies. Certain movies at midnight.
We might be a little too old for midnight movies.
And the pacing of The Beyond is so purposefully slow and ethereal that it really is hard to watch at midnight.
I still argue with Becca that we did not fall asleep at any point.
I never fell asleep.
You guys didn't feel like it.
Both.
I was unconscious.
Were both out. Because I looked over and Rob had his eyes closed and you were snoring really softly. It was really faint. At which point I turned to Elric, getting ready to say, holy shit, Rod's asleep. Let's fuck with him. And Elric was like head leaned back, just
Listen,
like out
Becca lies a lot, so we can
all the time. All the time. No, but even at this point, I turned around and was like, they're asleep.
I'm going to admit one thing. I actually missed the iconic shot of the girl with her head kind of... the acid, I think, rips her head open. The little orange redhead girl. The first thing, I did not see the iconic shot of her in this one. I must have closed my eyes.
Well, it's all a blur.
I was dazing in and out, guys, myself. And I just happened to catch that one moment when you were both asleep. And especially because, like, you guys, we went out. There were beers beforehand. So
I even introduced it.
I still thought. There was no question why you guys were out. But then I stayed up and watched the entire thing, kind of, and I was forcing myself to stay awake. But I discovered something that in between, like, acid melting heads and spiders ripping out tongues, there are these long stretches of just people running into room with poorly dubbed gasps and things like that. And the soundtrack is very pulsating the entire time. So the movie does kind of just lend itself.
That's what is unique about it. Like, it's an interesting movie because I think the first time you see that film has a real impact on you. Yeah. I think you've seen it a couple times. It's less. You go back just for those couple iconic sequences, the ending and some of the others. I think that's Fulci in a nutshell. I think Fulci's genius. I think why I keep coming back to Fulci, I look at Fulci and Bava's the better director. Like, it's not even worth arguing. But Fulci's the more interesting director. I feel like he's this really personal, put something into gore and shock things that is more personal. It seems like he's actually trying to say something with these little scenes, but I don't think he knows what to do with the rest of the movie. On some of these movies, like Zombie, all those films have it. New York Ripper, they have these like 3 or 4 scenes that are just astounding, padded with weird misogynist, and so I don't know. He's an idiosyncratic filmmaker, and I think that's why he's interesting.
Yeah, it's still one of my favorite films, but even me watching it at 12 o'clock, like, I was forcing myself to stay awake.
Yeah, that was a tough one for sure.
It was intense.
But we had fun, and that film is coming out 100% March 24th.
On Blu-ray.
Glow-in-the-dark, Blu-ray covers, it's all happening.
Yeah.
We were promised that it was going to happen.
Very exciting.
Did you see Xtro?
I did. I watched Xtro.
I'll let you talk about Xtro first before
I'll keep it brief. I thought it was excellent.
Of course you did.
It's really great.
It's pretty awesome. It was pretty awesome. The only thing, the things I questioned in it were just like batshit crazy things that, of course, once I watched the director's interview, made total sense. A lot of it having to do with Bob Shea, who was the producer on it. The ending's kind of weird. I like the alternate ending on the disc better. Yeah. And of course it was, he's like, well, they just, Bob Shea went and made this ending without me and just put it on the movie. I didn't even know it was there. And I'm like, that's totally ending. Nightmare on Elm Street kind of deal, whatever. And also the idea that the Black Panther
that's not bad. So in this film, if you haven't seen Xtro, there's a great drag scene where the person's walking down the brightly white lit corridor and there's just a perfect Black Panther that starts walking to camera. Gorgeous scene. Like, but you're thinking about an indie film going, how the fuck did you get a Black Panther? And anyway, he gets to the commentary. He's like, everyone just tried to have a hand in it. Bob Shea called and said, you have to put a Black Panther in your movie. I'm going to pay for it.
It was this one. He's like,
that's the one thing.
He's like, sometimes a producer has an idea that they just won't let go of. And he's like, and Bob would not let go of the Black Panther. And he's like, and it didn't make any sense. And he's like, no. I want a Black Panther in the movie.
And yet for me as a viewer, it completely worked. I'm on Bob Shea's side on this one.
But so much of the rest of the film doesn't make sense that, like, when you see the Black Panther, you're just like, I guess I just don't get it.
I understood everything. I found that film really worked for me. The only thing that was weird was the clown stuff, and he admits that the clown is fabrication. And the idea is that the kid can make anything with his mind, so it makes sense. But a dwarf clown is a little random.
Yeah,
but it is such a fun movie, which brings me to my review.
Xtro 2.
Yes, and I don't like to throw around terms like sucks a bag of dicks, but I hate to just throw things around like that. But I've got to say, Xtro 2 is actually one of my least favorite sequels I've ever seen in my life.
He agrees with you, the director.
And it's not, but here's the difference. It is not for the reason that the director said, which was Jan Michael Vincent ruined his movie. Jan Michael Vincent actually does not, I mean, behind the scenes maybe, on screen, he does nothing wrong. He's completely just standard. The problem is the movie feels like it's the Asylum or Sci-Fi Channel making, basically trying to make an exact replica of Aliens. Yeah. And it carries over none of the mythology of Xtro.
Which they weren't allowed to.
Yeah. But it's nothing to do with Xtro. Like none of the iconography of Xtro is in this movie. It's all aliens. And it has this big creature that isn't as interesting as the Xtro creature. Like it's probably meant to be. It has a couple decent scenes, but it's really like one of those sequels where I was like, this doesn't even feel even related whatsoever.
Right. So when are you watching Xtro 3? Watch the skies.
I'll finish it. I'll finish this Xtro thing.
Yeah. Excellent.
But that was, to me, it was a complete, it was a dud. It was I hate being negative on the show. We try to be positive. But that one was a dud for me.
All right. So what else? Anything else?
Oh man, I'd never seen this film. I'd never seen At Midnight I Will Take Your Soul, and I can't even say his full name.
That would be Jose Margica.
Anyway, that's the first Brazilian. Everyone knows him as Coffin Joe. And Coffin Joe, 1967, and he has the long fingernails. This was the first Brazilian horror film, and I kind of wanted to wait to see these films on screen, so I'd never seen them, and something just. I can't remember why I got to see it. Anyway, it's a really beautiful little film. It's super independent. The guy made it for very little. It's the first horror film made down there. He didn't plan on even acting in it.
There you go.
As their director.
Jose Mojica Marins.
Yeah. But Coffin Joe is what he became popular. And so, it's basically about this undertaker. What's so cool about this film is basically it's playing on a Western. You watch this film as a Western, and he's the villain. But he's also the main character, and he's tormenting a town. It's like if Henry Fonda was the only character you saw in Once Upon a Time. It's so cool, and it's like so he's just tormenting everyone. Everyone hates him. Everyone's scared of him. But then he becomes the main character, and it's all about this one woman who he abuses, saying, "At midnight I will come back from the dead and take your soul." And it's an amazing film, but it's low budget and a lot of things. You feel like there's certain imagery he could have pushed more. And then you see that when it ends the trailer for the second film called At Midnight I'll Possess Your Soul, I think. And
awesome.
It looked amazing. Like you could see all the places he improved just the kind of visual storytelling. It looked really great. So
the second one gets crazy trippy.
Yeah, it looked a lot stranger.
It's a lot more crisp. Like it's a much better film. I love the second one.
Because the first one was a hit.
Yeah.
So it was actually a big deal and put him on the scene. But no, it's a really, I would actually caveat, I would say try to wait to see it on screen because I have a feeling, if you went to one of those things where it played and it went till midnight, it would be perfect because it's at midnight I'll take. Yeah. So if it was playing at like 10:30 and it ends at midnight, but it's fascinating. And the one thing that really crossed my mind because the way it looked, he would have made a perfect cameo in A Girl Walks Home Alone. If he was like the arch, because those two films almost look the same. Yeah. You could almost put them side by side in a modern Iranian vampire film. But that was really cool. And the only other thing I'm going to throw out there, this is the best story I've heard in years. And this like sounds huge, but there's a TV show on HBO right now that I knew I'd like, but I didn't realize how much, called The Jinx. And it's the life and deaths of Robert Durst. And I'm a true crime junkie, and I find those kind of stories. Andrew Jarecki's a very good documentarian, made Capturing the Freedmans. But he also made this little thriller that I thought was so-so. It was called All Good Things, a couple years ago with Ryan Gosling and the Spider-Man girl.
Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten Dunst, and it's about loosely based on this billionaire industrial, part of a industrial New York family whose wife went missing, and it's never been solved. And I'd forgotten all about this thriller, but then this is the true story. And what happened is the guy who it's based on has never talked about it in 20 years because he's told by all his lawyers never talk about it. He saw this movie, calls the director and calls Magnolia and says, "Can I talk to the director?" It says his name and then says, "Yes, I'd like to do an on-record interview with him only." Because of how he portrayed me in the movie, because it wasn't completely one-sided. And that's what the 6-part documentary on HBO is, basically a mixture of this live interview with all the footage of all things. And the crazy thing about the story, it's not just one person went missing. He's now then linked, as you're watching, to 3 totally batshit different murders. And it's and the guy's free, and it's the most. It makes Nightcrawler look tame.
Wow!
As a story, seriously, as a character piece, it's the most crazy thing I've ever seen. So I've seen the first 4. There's 2 to come, and it's called astounding. It's called The Jinx, and really, it's one of the best things I've seen. It's up there with True Detective, but it's a documentary
it's
series, and so I have no idea how it's going to end. And it's just one of those things where things keep happening. You're like, how is this a human? we're all wired differently, but man, this guy's just wired differently.
Wow.
And so I really recommend that if you can get it on HBO. That's the one thing that really kind of bowled me over.
Okay.
But anyway.
Nice.
I recommend a movie that was on at the Cine Family this week. The movie about the Doom
Journey.
The Doom Journey. Yeah. Have you seen that?
No, but they're meant to be on a. Richard Stanley is meant to be on a show before he goes.
Well, get him on your show.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic movie
about Dr. Moreau, Island of Dr. Moreau.
About the making of Island Dr. Moreau, and Richard was originally going to direct it, and then Bob Shea fired him, and got in John Frankenheimer, and Richard was so distraught. It's a horrible story, but talk about Hollywood. It wraps up some of the stuff you've been talking about.
Yeah.
Richard came back as an extra, as an animal, as a dog,
right,
unrecognizable, to see what they were doing to his movie. And so you have this director of the movie looking at shooting these. It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking, but it's an incredible Hollywood story.
Well, there's a power struggle, right, between, I'm going to see it on Monday, but there's a power struggle between Brando and Val Kilmer. The egos, I guess, are also ruining the film. So it's not completely Frankenheimer's fault, I assume, because he's kind of a gun for hire.
He was a gun for hire, and he came in to save a situation.
Yeah.
But Brando is hilarious in the film, and he goes... Talk about use the word batshit. Well, batshit. I mean, wait till you see Brando in this.
I love anyone who casts Brando after seeing the Apocalypse Now documentary.
Yes.
Like after you watch that and see him just like tear up the script, throw it away, gain all that weight. Shadows.
I did a film with Dennis Hopper, Mad Dog Morgan, and Dennis went straight from my movie to Apocalypse Now. He's basically Mad Dog Morgan with cameras in Apocalypse Now. But he told me this story about how he arrived on the set and the crew and everyone were having dinner, and Brando was talking to Francis Ford Coppola, and Dennis, being in the state he was, said, hey, guys, if you're going to talk, tell all of us what you're talking about, okay?
Yeah.
And Brando turned to Coppola and said, I don't want to see that guy ever again in my life. I'm not doing any of my scenes with him. You figure it out. Got up and walked out. So if you see Apocalypse Now, they're never in this. It's a back of Dennis's. It's a double. They're never in any scene together. Really, you'll see it. And they cut to Dennis talking. Dennis had to do all these scenes to the wall,
Yeah.
And
I mean, he was
Brando
out there at that point.
Yeah. So
had he done the last movie before you worked with him?
Yeah.
Okay, because that just sounds outrageous.
Well, that's great. It's a great movie. The funny thing is, when I went to meet him in Taos, New Mexico for casting, and that was just wild. I mean, it was a commune. This would be 73. Something like that.
And they're all editing and doing all sorts of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Particularly all sorts of stuff. Said it was too much for him, even. He was like, crazy.
I enjoyed it. It wasn't too much for me. But anyway, Dennis said, I want you to see last movie. And I said, oh, what's that? And he said, the last movie. I said, I understand. This is like Who's On First. I didn't know that the title of the movie was the last movie. And he kept on, I want you to see the last movie. I said, I know, okay, but what is it? So anyway, he drives me in his pickup truck, which had a whole lot of bullet holes in it. He said that the Indians had been shooting at him, and which was true. And we drive into town, and he owns the cinema there. There's one cinema there. Huh. And he owns it, and it just plays the most recent cut of the last movie.
Oh, wow.
That's all it plays.
Wow.
So we go in there, and there's an Indian in there, an old Indian, watching the movie. So Dennis stops, he goes up to the projectionist and start from the beginning. So I watched the last movie. It must have been in the last cinema in Taos. Anyway, it was a fantastic experience, but how'd I get onto that?
Wow, I don't know, but I can't wait to hear about
story.
You hear that there's a documentary, the American Dreamer, and it's going to be remastered this year by Vinegar Syndrome, but it was always that cult tape that people would pass around, and it's basically a documentary of
American Dreamer. It's great.
Yeah, that followed Dennis during the period of making that, and it's really like maybe the best ever filmed about a director, because it is. I mean, it shows him having threesomes, like actually having sex with like 3 other women. I mean, it shows him getting high, it shows him drinking, shows him spouting philosophy, but it's like it just feels like you were there. It's a crazy piece of.
I just have to, speaking on behalf of directors, I just want to say we don't all do that.
Oh, come
on. Don't shatter the illusion.
That's how you got Howling 3 after 2.
Actually, he's got a great story about that.
Well, I filmed apparently, I was described as the most shocking threesome in film history in the Howling 2.
Oh, yeah.
Because it includes miscegenation, bestiality, lesbianism, species transformation, all in the same scene. I thought
you've done it.
That's like a checklist right there.
That's quite. There's more.
Yeah. That's a
great the Richard Stanley one, though, I've heard it's going to play 2 more times at Cinefamily next Monday and Tuesday, so we should probably all try to get there. Yeah. And then after that, it probably won't play again theatrically.
Was he there when you saw it?
Well, I saw it before, but I know it was on Friday.
Right.
On Sunday. He's a new friend of mine. I met him in Germany last year, and the most incredible thing about him, apart from his talent, is his grandfather was the explorer Richard Stanley, who found Dr. Livingstone. The guy who said Dr. Livingstone, I presume, is Richard's grandfather.
Holy smokes!
Wow!
And there's a photo of him. It looks the same. The explorer, he's Richard's.
And he's South African, right?
Yeah,
they're born in South Africa.
Now he lives on an island, right, with somewhere in France.
I thought he lived in like a mountain in France or something.
Yeah, he lives in France.
He's
a fascinating filmmaker.
Yeah,
it's on VOD now.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, Lost Souls.
Oh,
yeah,
it's on VOD.
Oh, then I'll
it's on VOD. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I didn't realize that. Yeah, no, it looks really good.
Yeah, it does.
Go ahead, but I don't mean to keep bouncing around, but I do want to focus. So
you're
what
fine.
Did you see?
Actually, I saw some interesting stuff. I finally watched Cat's Eye. 1985, Louis Teague. I'd never seen it before. It was one of these where, like we were talking about, I think it was Elric and I started talking about it, and then it dawned on me while we were talking that I thought I'd seen it, but I'd never actually seen it. And so I watched it. It was not my favorite anthology, but it was fun.
I only remember the Drew Barrymore little troll thing. That's the only skit I remember.
That was the best segment. That was the last one. The first one, Quitters Inc., I actually really liked a lot. The second one was The Ledge, and that one was so-so. But yeah, I love Louis Teague, period. So yeah, it was definitely...
Philippe, have you ever worked on an anthology?
No.
No, I didn't. I hadn't seen it. Okay.
No. Not that I can remember.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not in the cards.
if you haven't seen Cat's Eye, I highly recommend it just to, for 80s anthology completion. It's definitely worth it. Also, Drew Barrymore is in every segment kind of awkwardly. And she's actually billed in the script as like the cast as the girl. Or our girl or something like that. It's a really weird way that they kind of bill her, but she's definitely like in every segment in different roles. So then last night I watched Contagion, which I'd never seen before, the Steven Soderbergh movie. Okay. Questionably a horror film, but it scared the shit out of me, so I'm going to put it in that category. It's that same kind of outbreak thing where by the end of it I'm like, we need to stockpile batteries, and why don't I have any more canned goods around the house?
That was the one he retired on. I was at the DJ screening where he showed it, and he announced live that he was retiring, and I was like, oh wow, that seems weird when you make 5 films a year.
Yeah, that worked out pretty well.
Now he's already directing.
Way to keep with that retirement.
I do wash my hands more since seeing that film.
Yeah, that's kind of, it says in the first 20 minutes of the movie, it says you touch your face over 2,000 times a day, 2 to 3 times a minute. And then I was so aware of my hands for the remainder of the film, and I'm watching it with my mom, and because my mom's staying with us till Tuesday, and Marnie, and they're both sneezing, and every single time they sneeze, I'm like,
kids are, it's
what's
insane.
going on? So it was just, but it made me realize that it's those types of movies that scare me and affect me. I can watch slasher films and monster films until, the end of time, but I will never think about them. I mean, I'll think about them, but they will never affect me after I'm done watching them. I won't go to bed that night thinking, oh, what if there's a monster in the closet or anything like that. But those films, today when I was in Ralph's, all I can think about is that guy over there who's coughing and I'm 10 feet away, and it had an effect on me. So That.
But also, you're allergic to everything.
I am allergic to everything.
Reasons to fear. These things will really kill you. Like there's a bar. We just discovered our McLeod's. Let's give it a quick plug.
Yes, there's a bar next door.
But we went next door just now. We grabbed this big beer. But as we were there, as Rob said afterwards, he said Bekah can never go in there because there's peanuts all over the floor.
And he just told me there was a pig, and I was like, I want to go hug the pig. And then he followed it up with there's peanuts, and I was like, fuck you guys.
Yeah. No,
in fact, we're drinking Nutty Brown, I think. So maybe we should pull that beer a little closer.
No, usually Nutty Brown is just like the flavoring. So
you'll be okay.
I think I'll survive, guys. But thanks.
All right.
And then the last thing, which was kind of the big thing of the week. So we went to this VHS swap on Sunday.
Oh yeah,
which was pretty fun actually.
Yeah, I didn't see any good VHS this time.
I kind of cleaned up. I got Necronomicon, which I know you've been looking for.
No, I've got it on DVD.
Okay.
Remember? That's the one I love from last year. Yeah, I love it.
I got the VHS tape of it. I got Bleeders, which I'm kind of psyched about. So I got some reasonably fun stuff.
Last time there was lots of stuff I hadn't heard. This time it just seemed like lots of VHS.
I got Jackie Kong's The Being.
Good movie.
So yeah, I got a couple of things. But the one that I was most excited about, I actually got on DVD. Somebody had a Thai DVD of that movie 7500, the plane movie that Takashi Shimizu, the guy who did the Grudge film, shot for CBS like 3 years ago, and it never got released here. It was like a huge budget. And it was this big deal because the Grudge guy was shooting a film for CBS Studios, and it was going to be huge, and then they never released it. And every year it ends up on like the whatever happened to list. And at the same time, every year for like the past 3 years, it's been put on like IMDb will update and it'll say coming in 2015, coming in 2016. Well, I got the Thai DVD. So I finally got to watch this film. It is so boring.
Oh, it's boring.
Yeah, and then I was like, well, this is why it's never been released. It's The Grudge on a plane, but I mean, it's a major cast. I mean, this was a huge film. It's Amy Smart and the guy from Entourage and Daniel Harris is in it.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was like a major film for them. And the guy who directed The Grudge. But it's The Grudge in space, but it's weird mythology because it never really explains what's going on with the ghosts.
In space or air?
Sorry, air.
Okay.
Let me go with that.
Because you had me at space.
Space would kick ass.
Quick segue, Philippe. What was the first film of yours that went to VHS with the arrival of VHS? Do you remember which one it was that hit home market?
Mad Dog.
Was it?
Mad Dog.
That was VHS.
Mad Dog Morgan. Yeah.
Because I feel like we got VHS later in New Zealand, Australia than Americans.
Mad Dog was the first Aussie movie to get a release here.
Interesting.
40 cinemas. That was a big deal.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So that's 1974, 75.
Yeah.
So it was the first on VHS.
But I bet Howling 2 would have done really well on VHS. It strikes me as it was like made for that.
It was huge.
Yeah.
Well, and so was Howling 3, by the way.
Yeah.
Was Mad Dog kind of at the start of like the exploitation movies that came over in the 70s, or where did it fall in the time frame?
It was the beginning.
Okay.
Very beginning. There were 4 films that started the Australian thing. Mm-hmm. Not all of them were so-called exploitation. Mm-hmm. Devil's Playground, Fred Skepsi's movie. Caddy, movie about a barmaid. Mm-hmm. Picnic at Hanging Rock.
Which is Peter Weir.
Which is never thought of as an exploitation film, but it fits in,
and one other one. Oh, Mad Dog.
Yeah.
And those 4 films were shown at Cannes Film Festival in 75, and then that was the beginning of the whole thing.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen Not Quite the documentary Not Quite Hollywood?
Yeah. I'm in it.
Yeah, he's in it.
Oh.
I only looked at the bits that I'm in.
It's like 3 hours.
No, it's a terrific film.
I loved it. Yeah.
It was really good.
It makes you really want to revisit all those films.
All those films,
my favorite moment is when the naked girl is on the front of the pickup truck.
Yeah.
And they cut to Quentin Tarantino, and he says, "Who the fuck thought of that?"
Yeah. He loves it. He's just gushing throughout the movie.
It was actually a movie that I heard about in that documentary. I bought, and I had it on my table this weekend, and you were asking what it was. Alvin Purple.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
It's this wonderful Australian sexploitation film that I first heard about in Not Quite Hollywood.
Okay. Wow.
And God, it's like
hilarious.
A sex comedy
Who
romp.
did Turkey
It's
Shoot?
funny.
Was that Brian Trinidad Smith?
Yeah.
Oh, he did the original Turkey Shoot. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's just wild. But I mean, we'll get to that. I mean, that's all. It all starts with tax shelters, right?
Yeah, tax shelters were great.
And they happen in New Zealand.
Actually, it wasn't tax shelters. It was something called 10BA, but it was 150% tax deduction. So if you invested $1 million, you got 1.5 million tax deduction. So there was an explosion of all these films. But the good thing is that there was no censorship or no one telling anyone what to make. It was just a straight tax deduction. So that's why you got all these bizarre movies.
Was yours the one where Dennis Hopper died? I can't remember, or at least in the documentary, they're like, Dennis Hopper technically died during the making of all these movies. Was that Mad Dog?
Like his heart stopped.
No, that was. Let me explain.
Right. Looks like I touched a nerve.
No, it's really funny.
What happened?
Dennis, this is what happened. So, Dennis, method actor, he discovered that Mad Dog Morgan drank rum, overproof rum.
Yeah.
So on the last day of the shoot, he wanted to visit Dennis's Mad Dog Morgan's grave. Now, for some reason, he's with my mother. I don't remember why. And so they go to Mad Dog Morgan's grave, and Dennis pours a bottle of rum on the grave and drinks a bottle of rum. And he's dressed as Mad Dog. And then he gets into a car with my mum. And they drive off. And the police have been waiting for him. The Victorian police have been waiting for him because there was Victorian police that got Mad Dog Morgan. So they grab him, DUI, they put him in jail, and the next morning, this is where the story, the next morning, still dressed as Mad Dog Morgan, the judge says, Mr. Hopper, I'm looking at the breathalyzer and the blood test here, and I can tell you that you are clinically dead. And you'll never be allowed to drive a car in the state of Victoria again. In fact, you'll never be allowed to drive in Australia again because we're deporting you immediately. And he was taken straight to the airport. That was the end of the shoot.
So there was no more shooting after that? Wow.
No, it was the end of the shoot. It was the last day.
Okay.
No, there was method in his madness.
I just love that he drove off with your mother after drinking.
I know.
You sound awfully calm and forgiving about that. He had a hell of an art collection, though.
He did.
Yeah, that's one thing about Hopper that not everyone knows.
He was a great art collector, and he was a great artist himself.
Yeah, as a director, I think he's one of the most underrated directors in America. I mean, unfortunately, probably certain life things got in the way of his career, but Out of the Blue is a great Dennis Hopper directed film.
Yeah. So what was the beginning for you? Because didn't you initially start out as a documentarian or going towards documentary films? Like, what was the filmmaking beginning for you?
Well, I was making films when I was a kid, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, professionally, my first job was working for Peter Sellers.
Oh, cool.
The first time I got paid was working for him as a script writer. We were working on a film called The Phantom. You know the Phantom comic strip character?
Yeah.
The Phantom versus the Fourth Reich. And I'd written it, and Peter Sellers loved it. Because he was going to play the Phantom at 83. So let me backtrack. He was going to play Hitler at 83 and Hitler's son Heinrich Hitler. And then he decided he wanted to play the Phantom as well. And that became a problem with King Features Syndicate, even though he was a huge star, because the Phantom at that time was like used in posters in New Guinea.
Muscular and...
Well, no, he uses telling people how to avoid syphilis and stuff, because a lot of people...
The Phantom was telling people how to avoid syphilis.
Yeah, in posters. Because,
that is
because
the
a lot of
craziest
people,
fucking marketing campaign ever.
Because the people... there are a lot of... in Africa, he was a hero. They thought it was real. And so he was used for health reasons, used in health.
Wow.
Things. So exactly. So King Features Syndicate, we can't make a mockery of the Phantom.
Because we'll lose the African.
We lose the whatever. Anyway, it was a shame. It was a shame. But
what an project.
That was my first professional job. But I was making what we used to call underground films for a long time too. And then I made a film in which Eric Clapton produced, my first film in London.
Wait, you guys were roommates, right?
Yeah, I told him that.
But,
That's crazy.
I know, but the funny thing is, a German interviewer, lost in translation, recently a German interviewer said, "So I understand that you lived in a room with Eric Clapton." I said, "Well, what?"
You're lying, sir.
But it wasn't exactly like that, but... we're old mates. So I lived. Do you know Martin Sharp? Ever heard of Martin Sharp, psychedelic artist who did all the Cream covers?
I would have seen his work.
I know the work.
All those covers. So it was Martin, myself, and Eric. We lived in a great building in London. This is 1967, 68, called the Pheasantry. It was a building, and it was a bohemian environment, shall we say? And we were all very creative, and Eric. Became rich overnight, really, with Cream. We never had any money. And he literally overnight, after he did a tour here, and then he said to me, he came back from America. He said, "Didn't you want to make a movie?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "How much would that cost?" And I thought of the biggest amount I could, £5,000. And he said, "Right, okay, let's go." So we went to his manager's office, Robert Stigwood, who became a huge producer later. But Eric says, "Robert, Philippe wants to make a movie. Give him a check for £5,000." And this guy looks at me with daggers. It's like, this is the spirit of the times, by the way. This is really the spirit of the times, 1968. And Stigwood says, "Well, but wait a minute, what's the deal?" and Eric says, "There's no deal, Robert. He wants to make a movie." There's no deal.
You should have kept him as your producer.
Listen, that experience, I think, probably ruined me. Because,
That's amazing.
Wow.
That's not like that anymore.
Yeah. What feature was that?
That was called Trouble in Melopolis. Jermaine Greer was the star of it, who later became famous for writing The Female Eunuch. Are you familiar with The Female Eunuch?
No.
The Female Eunuch. It was an early feminist bestseller. There was Betty Friedan and Jermaine Greer at that time. Can I take a break? I need to fix my lipstick.
Totally.
And I'll be right back.
Back to Sybil's boobs. I assume that's just where I was leaving off.
That's what you were thinking. That was what you were thinking. All right. Do you really want to get into? No.
Howling 2's too early for that. No,
we're way too early. We're still on Eric Clapton making his movie.
Yeah, we're gonna think about Sybil in the back of our minds, though.
Well, on that movie, Trouble in Melopolis, which I'm going to be a very limited DVD, I think.
Oh, okay.
But we're putting it out on DVD. But it was my first film, and I thought had this idea: the main character is a nutcase. Why don't we get a real nutcase? Because they can't fail,
this
right?
Is so bohemian.
So we said, let's get a real lunatic. And so we found this guy just been let out of a mental asylum. His name was John Ivor Golding. And he's perfect. He's obviously completely crazy. And on the first day of the shoot, at lunch break, the assistant director came to me and said, "Listen, there's a bit of a problem though. John Ivor Golding has just done a shit in the middle of the set."
Oh, wow.
What?
And I said, "Well, don't tell anyone. It'll freak everyone out. I'll talk to him and clean it up." And he clean it up. I said, please. So I go to this guy and I say, "John, you really must use the toilets." And he said, "Oh, have I inconvenienced you?" "You really have. And please, in the future, use the bathroom." "No problem. Very sorry." Anyway, this we finished the whole film. The film comes out. Derek Malcolm, distinguished film critic for The Guardian, says, "Interesting Brechtian musical by Philippe Mora, avant-garde, experimental, some amateur actors, but a brilliant performance of a lunatic by newcomer John Ivor Golding."
Nice.
I thought, see, the theory worked. I just wouldn't do it again, but the theory worked.
Well, somebody else followed that Herzog, right?
Yeah, that's a bit later. But anyway, I told that story to Dennis when we started, later, and he said, "Listen, man, you don't want to tell that story to actors because they're going to think that you just, that we shit on sets and that you think that." And I said, "No, I'm just telling you what happened." And he said, "No, don't tell that story to actors." The only other thing Dennis said to me, because I was a young director, he was a veteran actor anyway. The only other thing he said to me, never say to an actor, was something I said to him, which was, "Dennis, isn't it Dorothy Parker? So funny. Dorothy Parker said, 'Scratch an actor and you'll find an actress.'" And I said that to Dennis. He said, "What do you mean by that?" I said, "I don't mean anything by that." I said, "Dorothy Parker said, 'Scratch an actor and you'll find an actress.'" And Dennis said, "Don't say that to actors, man, because they'll take it, you think they're gay." And Anyway, I forgot about that. I put it aside. But years later, I said to Alan Arkin, "Oh, it's fantastic fun. Dorothy Parker." She said, "Scratch an actor and you'll find an actress." What do you mean by that? I said, I don't mean anything. I'm just saying that Dorothy Parker said that.
Wow. The defensive streak of the actors.
Holy smokes.
That's pretty cool. I like that one.
So The Beast Within was your first Hollywood American movie, correct?
Right.
How did that, how did you make that transition? I mean, did you always want to come to Hollywood to make movies, or, I mean...
How do you even immigrate?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you even move here if you're... Go through the rigorous process of immigration.
You go through the canyon. What's that river there in Texas? No. No, what happened was I couldn't... Well, there was no film industry in Australia at that time. There was nothing, so I couldn't get a job. And then... some executives at United Artists saw Mad Dog because it got a release here, and they called me in for a meeting, and they were quizzing me on how did I make this movie for $350,000. They couldn't understand how I'd done it, and so that was the main reason. They were impressed with that, and they liked the violence, and so they said, "Well, we'll give you $5 million," which was like incredible, to make The Beast Within. Oh, actually, they gave me 2 scripts to choose from. I picked The Beast Within. The other one was a psychic thing, and that was it really. It was because through Mad Dog that I got that job. And interestingly enough, on the Australian-New Zealand front, I was the first Australian director to get hired by a studio since John Farrow, Mia Farrow's dad.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
And that broke the ice. Every second guy's saying, "G'day, g'day, it's good to be in Ollie."
Now it's changed so much because so many Australian... I mean, I know a lot of American actors who are threatened by the amount of Australian actors working here, and also Australians in film that, the organization has a bigger... And it's interesting. Major shift.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, that's the one that... I mean, obviously, we were friends with Tom Holland, who wrote the script for that one, and
that's the one I haven't seen. It's of all your films, I still haven't seen The Beast Within, and I watched the trailer today, and I really regretted it because I'm not regretted seeing the trailer, but I saw a bit of the transformation scene.
It's phenomenal.
And I was just like,
it's good stuff.
It's
I didn't have
gorgeous.
time.
Who did your practical effects on that?
The Berman Studio.
Huh. It was really nicely done.
Actually, when it was previewed. It wasn't a Fox movie, but it was previewed on the Fox lot. And when the transformation started, people started screaming and running out. Some people ran out of the theater screaming. No one would do it now, but then it was unusual. Like that, a bit like Linda Blair's head turning around.
Wow. And
the studio said to me, studio executive who shall remain nameless, said, you better tone that down. And I had been briefed by my agent, Robert Littman, character in his own right. He said, "Listen, whatever they say to you, just say yes, and then ignore it."
Yeah, that's how Robert Downey Jr. always says that same thing. Yeah.
And so he goes, "You've got to tone that down." I said, "Yes." And so anyway, I didn't touch it. So that's why it is over the top. But I mean, I think that's why it's That's why I like it.
This is what, like 81. So had
80
in 1980. So had American Werewolf in London and The Howling happened yet? Because those also were big transformation movies.
Right, and we were kind of ahead of them, but the release was later.
Right, so you had shot this before those came out, but then you came out after.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because there was a change of the guard at United Artists, I remember, right in the middle of when we were about to be released.
Mm-hmm.
And would you get a gig before the film got seen? Would agents try to get you the next gig, or did you have to wait till the film came out and see how it did back then before you'd go on to whatever was next?
Well, there's no rules on this, but in that particular situation, I got hired to direct The Return of Captain Invincible.
Mm-hmm. Wow!
Is there a first one?
No, that was the gag.
Yeah,
that was the gag. That was just the sequel to a movie that's never been made.
The superhero who couldn't fly.
Couldn't
remember how to fly.
Well, he's before we made Captain Invincible, no superhero had a problem. But Captain Invincible is an alcoholic, and he has to be sobered up and taught to fly again, to fight fascism.
Which is Christopher Lee.
Which is Christopher Lee. But so he was the first superhero with a problem. And now they all have problems.
Yeah. Right. That's how you humanize them quickly,
Yeah. So at the time, it was a little bit ahead of its time.
Was that the first time you met Christopher Lee? Was on that movie?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's a musical, right?
It's a musical.
That kicks ass. By Richard O'Brien, who did.
Well, he
Rocky
did 4
Horror.
songs in it. Yeah, Richard O'Brien and Richard Hartley did 4 songs in Captain Invincible.
Richard O'Brien, who's a Kiwi, which is fascinating.
Yeah,
he also did Rocky Horror.
Yeah, that's right. I know. There's a statue in Hamilton, in New Zealand, of him. Up just recently, they put one up.
Really?
There's a statue of Richard O'Brien.
Yep, in the hometown where he's from. It's pretty cool.
Small town.
We don't have a lot, and we give you Russell Crowe. It's all yours. We forsake him.
There's a film that you did that I haven't seen yet called A Breed Apart, which I watched the trailer before, and I mean, amazing cast. Rutger Hauer. That's what you worked with Donald Pleasance. We talked a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Off record. So, I mean, how did that come about? And how'd you get all the? I mean, I think Kathleen Turner's in it too. Like a lot of amazing people in that movie.
Is it a genre pick?
Sort of.
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of. Not really. It's a ecological. It's an ecological thriller. That's how it was described.
Right.
It's about this collector played by Donald Pleasance, who's fantastic, one of my favorite actors.
Yeah, it's good.
And he collects rare bird eggs, but what's missing is a bald eagle's egg. So it's about he hires a mountain climber to go get this bald eagle for his collection, but there's a Vietnam vet played by Rutger Hauer, who's an ecology, leave the birds alone kind of thing. So, and Kathleen Turner is the local girl who runs the birdseed shop. And
this is a hell of a setup.
And so there's a confrontation between those two. But my pleasure in it, I have to say, was Donald Pleasance, working with him, because I just loved him ever since I was a kid.
Had you seen Wake and Fright?
We talked about that.
But I will go further back than that. The Great Escape.
The
Great Escape. But Wake and Fright's a brilliant film.
Yeah, I think it's really one of the best Australian films. It's powerful. Hasn't aged.
Directed by a Canadian, Ted Kocher,
who also did Rambo.
Who I just met recently, and wonderful guy. I told him you made the best Australian film, but for a Canadian.
That one, it bothers the shit out of me for some reason. It just feels so confining and hot and gross all at the same time.
I feel drunk just watching it.
That's the Outback, right? I mean,
it's very accurate. It's really horrifying, and that drinking culture like that.
The pokies,
the constant
it's gambling, ridiculous games.
They think that pseudo masculine, like drink another one,
which is still there. I mean, New Zealand, Australia, it's a huge part of the culture. I mean, even wearing a rugby jersey. I mean, that's I always make fun of certain things about New Zealand, but it's a whole country. Like basically, the whole mood of the country is based on a rugby game, whether you win or lose. It will be a national depression the next day. And that to me is like the people who were in the arts there. It was always kind of, I mean, I like both, but it was always a little weird. Yeah. Because you wouldn't have that in America because there's no real defining American thing because each state has a team or whatever, Yeah. But when you come from these smaller places, your whole identity is this like weird sport thing. So I think that's the film that kind of nailed that the best. And the scenes with Donald, what's so subversive about it is then it also implies that there's a homosexual relation.
It doesn't just imply it. The title, the original, Waking in Fright is waking up with Donald Pleasance on top of you at the end of the film.
No, I hadn't
seen
that
He wakes
movie.
in Fright.
You bastard.
Yeah.
I've never seen that movie before. Alamo, I think it was, that did the release. Was it Alamo?
Because it was
Draft House.
Was it lost for a while? What was the story?
Yeah, it was lost.
I didn't even know it was lost. Yeah.
But I'd never seen it till Draft House put it out, I think 2 years ago.
It was recent.
And that for me was worse than Deliverance. Like it was that.
They're actually
good comparison. Good comparison.
I could see both those films having a similar power.
Good double bill.
There's also a Belgian film called Calvare that I'd say has that same kind of.
But that one feels forced.
That one's very forced.
Feel as organic.
A sophisticated buggery double bill.
Yeah.
Buggery
double bill.
That's good. I like that. Double bugger.
What stands out to you about working with somebody like Donald, who obviously you were a fan of and had a lot of respect for, and then you get to work with them? So what stands out?
Well, the best thing about directing is when you don't have to direct. You don't have to do any work with Donald Pleasance or Christopher Walken or these people. I mean, I'm only half joking, but I mean, these guys, you just let them loose, and if they feel comfortable, and you've obviously you discuss the scene and everything, so it's a pleasure. It's just like being a pilot in a fantastic plane. It goes on auto, and Donald. I can tell this tale. I know he won't mind, but I was worried about his drinking because he was a little older at that point, and he was just drinking Chablis nonstop, all the time. And I mentioned it to him, and so he immediately thought that I, for some reason, was going to stop him drinking. So he started stocking Chablis in every cistern he could find. Is that what it's called? On the porcelain thing on top of a toilet. Cistern?
Tank here.
Tank. The
Water
tank. So the tank. So any tank he could find in the hotel, he was stocking.
That's amazing.
Quite clever with Chablis. So it was always cool. So he never ran. I just mentioned it, but he got paranoid immediately. Maybe that on. Anyway, he fantastic actor, and the movie that I remember him seeing early on is the Polanski movie.
Yeah,
Cul-de-sac with
it's amazing performance.
That's an incredible film when he runs around in a nightie.
Did you hear about the casting of that though? Because Polanski was so young, you just don't know in the order. He met Donald Pleasance, and Donald Pleasance had a full head of hair and dressed for kind of macho or whatever. He met him at a bar or whatever, cast him. And then Donald Pleasance pulled up in a limo having shaved his head completely and wearing a pink, maybe it's a pink nightgown.
It's a pink nightgown,
Polanski fucking lost it and wanted him fired and just was pulling out his hair. But that's what they got. And that's what
that makes the movie.
Yeah, it is. It's the weird idiosyncratic characters in that movie that, because it's a weird movie. It's a
very strange movie. But I was I still am a painter, but I had an exhibition of paintings early on in Melbourne, and one of the paintings was Donald Pleasance in that nightie.
Cool. Oh, wow.
From Cul-de-sac.
You wouldn't have images of that anymore?
Maybe.
Yeah. That'd be cool to see.
Maybe somewhere. All right, Elric, I'm going to let you loose.
Oh.
Anything you want to know about Howling 2 or 3?
Let's go.
Well, I will say I'm jumping ahead, but the first Howling film I ever saw was actually Howling 3. Way back, it came on TV in New Zealand. I missed the first 10 minutes, and then I just did not know what I was in for. So I didn't even need to know, probably the intent of writing it. I didn't need to be a Howling film. It was just a crazy, weird marsupials, kangaroos, also, creature feature. But going back to, I'm a fan of Sybil Danning. But I also really like the band. I think the band's incredible. And
that's great.
I usually hate that in movies where they cut to a band a lot. That's one of the only times in a movie that I love that band.
Yeah. Where did you find the band?
Yeah.
The band was, I forgot the name of the company, but they had done the soundtrack. I may have the order of this, I think wrong, but they'd done the soundtrack for Breed Apart. And they suggested this band, Steve Parsons. And when I was shooting the film in Prague, and I heard that song, Howling, I thought, this is great. Get the band over here. We'll put them in the movie. So that's how that came about. And it wasn't scripted. But then I scripted a scene. I'm behind. I should backtrack a bit. We're shooting this behind the Iron Curtain. This is one of the first films shot behind the Iron Curtain, along with Yentl and Amadeus.
Who knew Howling 2 was so cutting edge politically?
Well,
it was really No, really, it was very politically cutting edge.
You want to make a movie about the making of this?
Because about that aspect, because I didn't realize what I was getting into. But I said to the studio there, we had to recreate an LA punk club in Prague behind the Iron Curtain. So I said to the head of the studio, "Do you have punks here?" And he said, "What's a punk?" I said, "Well, punk is young person, rebels, leather, things through their nose, tattoos, shaved heads." And he's looking at me like, "I don't know, but we'll find out." This is 1984, behind the Iron Curtain. The KGB are all over us. What's happening?
That's crazy.
And so the next day, the guy said, "Yeah, we have punks. How many do you need?" I said, I don't know, 400? No problem. So anyway, the thing is that
them up off the streets.
They're real punks. So they show up if you look at it closely, and they'd never heard or been. First of all, they weren't allowed to be together in groups of more than 3. no one was allowed to be together in a group more than 3. It's like, occupied by the Russians. And so anyway, Steve started singing and they really went going crazy. They'd never been in a concert before.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that, as I say, if you look at it, you'll see it's really real. And just before we're in the middle of shooting, actually, and I've written about this story, but I'll tell it now because it's still amazing to me. The assistant director came to me and said, there's a problem. The studio's been surrounded by soldiers and police, and there's a general out there who wants to talk to you. I said, okay. So I go out there, and there's this Russian general who looks like you couldn't cast anyone tough. I mean, like, this guy had obviously killed a lot of, I mean, this was really bad, okay? Like, the face, you couldn't, So, and there's an interpreter, and the interpreter says to me, the general wants to know, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm making a film about werewolves. And the question comes back from the general, what is a werewolf? Oh, wow. And so I explain it's a man who turns into a wolf when there's a full moon. And then, great moment this was, when the general looks at me and then he just starts laughing. Like, really laughing hard, like loud, oh, really loud. And then he stops and he says, you through the interpreters, you've got 30 minutes to complete the scene. And then everyone has to leave in groups of 3 every 10 minutes because this is illegal and we can't have young people leaving in a big group like this, which is what we did. And then, I got back to the hotel after, got back to the hotel at 2 a.m. or something, and all the punks are outside the hotel screaming, screaming, yelling. It was really like their moment of freedom.
Wow.
They just couldn't believe it, And that became famous in Prague. So I've been back there a few times, and it was political.
Wow.
But the story that is really funny is I'm 2 weeks into the shoot and the werewolf suits haven't arrived from Hollywood. So I call the producer, John Daly, and I said, John, where's the werewolf suits? We're 2 weeks in. He said, they're on the way. Literally the next day, 2 days later, these big crates arrive. 3 big crates, stenciled 20th Century Fox, Planet of the Apes. And so I open the boxes and they're the bloody monkey suits from Planet of the Apes, which the producers hired. So I ring him up and I say, John, you sent me fucking monkey suits and everyone knows this is a werewolf film. Everyone knows Howling too. And he said, no, you work it out. You're talented. And I said, this got nothing to do with talent, mate. There's monkeys and there's wolves. And he says, I'll sort it out. And he hangs up on me. And Christopher Lee is in the room listening to this, very alarmed. He says, Philippe, I have an idea for you. Tomorrow, do a close-up of myself, and I will explain that before man turns into wolf, he goes through a monkey phase. Man, monkey, wolf. Get it? I said, well, that's a bloody good idea. So exactly what we'll do. So that's what we did. So, and we ended up shooting all the wolves back here in the word transformations. Yeah. That's why the films has a very stylized cut to the werewolf, But anyway, I think it was Variety came out and they said, what's Philippe Mora doing this? He's lost his mind, with this Howling 2 thing. But there's one really interesting thing in it. It does explain for the first time that before man turns into wolf, he goes through a monkey phase.
Scientist Christopher Lee. I love it. That is incredible. That's amazing, that punk story about punk. You never hear those kind of stories about these kind of films,
Yeah. And you had not even seen the original Howling when you did this.
No.
How did you get the gig?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, it had nothing to do with the first one. I mean, except that the producers had the rights to it, and they'd worked with me. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, if you ask to do a sequel for a director, I mean, it's damned if you do and damned if you don't, because if you don't copy the first one, the people who love the first one think that's really bad. And if you do copy the first one, they say, oh, you just copied the first one. The other people say, there's a no-win. So I opted to do a completely different thing, except for the beginning of it. It's related to Howling. And the irony is, and then Howling 3, I really went overboard and had nothing. I didn't even watch Howling 2 before I made Howling 3.
I wouldn't call Howling 3 over.
And that's a completely different thing, you know. But the funny thing is, it's the most successful series of films, a franchise in film history where each film has absolutely nothing to do with the other one.
Yeah. That's true. There's quite a lot.
3 evolve? I mean, 2.
No, I'll crucify you if you jump from that.
We skipped Sybil.
We did skip Sybil and the famous Your Sister is a Werewolf, which I think is one of the great lines in cinema. Christopher Lee says that to her. It is so incredible.
Well, only Christopher Lee could deliver that line.
Oh my God, that line just kills me.
Only Christopher could deliver that.
But yeah, I mean, with Sybil, I mean, for one, why'd you cast Sybil? Like, what was she doing at the time that caught your interest, or was she part of the package to put her in the film? How does one get Sybil?
I'm laughing, I'm laughing because there's too many jokes here. But the thing is, John Daly, the producer, knew Sybil, and he said Sybil would be great as the werewolf queen. I met her and thought she'd be great as a werewolf queen. So. But onto the subject that you're implying you're interested in is that
you mean the credits?
It's scripted that she reveals her breasts.
Yeah,
beautiful werewolf queen breasts. And Sybil said, "Look, Philippe, I've got to show you something, and you've got to photograph my breasts from a certain angle because one is lower than the other." And so I have to turn this particular way so they're even. Otherwise, it's going to look. Let me show you. So we go into her dressing room, and she shows me, and she shows me how I've got to photograph her.
Wow!
And I said, I get it. I get it. You got to be like that. And and so I certainly didn't say that. And I didn't need to. Once was enough. And. Fast learner. Yeah. And so that's how that... So then cut to, I've got to go and shoot another film. I deliver my cut to John Daly. And I've got in the cut a sequence where she shows a thing and they cut to a werewolf going, and then she cut to her. And I did 2 or 3 times, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, then John Daly, the editor and John Daly both called me, but John Daly said, the editor said, John thinks that it's fantastic when Sybil shows her breast that way. I said, yeah, so what? And he said, well, he's asking me to repeat it. And so then John calls me. And I can't do his accent, but it was a Cockney accent, but it was, oh, it's fantastic, mate, the tits. Oh, Jesus Christ, mate. Oh, the boobs. Oh, God, can't wait, just let's print it, print more. And he's the funniest guy.
Yeah.
We miss him. I said, well, let's go for it. I mean, that sounds hysterical. How many times what are you talking about? Oh, it's fantastic, mate. It keeps fantastic. And so I never for a moment thought that he'd printed 17 times. and nor did anyone else. But it turned out it was so funny when I finally saw it. It was so funny. This is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So, go for it.
So how does that premiere screening go down if you're sitting next to Sybil?
Did Sybil know that you were doing that before she saw it?
Well, I didn't know. No one knew. I was in Australia. No, Sybil was mortified. She was terribly upset, and she went to John Daly, and God knows what happened then. But so iconic now and so much fun. She's totally come around to.
Yeah.
What do you do?
It's one
she
of her
knows
great roles, actually. In the long run.
Yeah.
I think she still has the costume, the crazy Sturba costume. I think she was talking about.
That was a really that was designed by an Aussie, Peter Mitchell. That black thing. Yeah, he was like a high fashion guy. But we had to create LA in Prague. So we actually, this is a funny footnote to the whole thing. I had to call my wife, Pamela, who was working on the production here. I said, the streets here, we need garbage from LA. So ship me some garbage from LA. So we shipped like 4 huge containers of garbage, trash from LA to put in the streets.
How was trash different from LA trash?
There wasn't any.
Oh, wow.
There was just a nothing there.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it looks like downtown LA, but you'll notice a bit of trash and, so that was difficult.
I'm surprised you'd even be allowed to shoot a film, like an American film in a country going through that.
It was non-political. Mm-hmm. It was a werewolf. That's why that is. And they were absolutely broke.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So they needed the money. And so they let us. And as I said, it's not political. So Yentl wasn't political. Mm-hmm. Amadeus was not political. And the crew was fantastic. My production designer, the Czech production designer, said to me, the difference between communism and capitalism is that in capitalism, man exploits man, but in communism, it's the other way around.
That's really good. That's great. That's a great one. And then you went back home to exploit your own nature habitats.
Now may I ask my more serious questions?
Yes,
okay. How did this come about? Because how did it transform from werewolves
or apes
apes to werewolves
to kangaroos?
Or other marsupials.
Marsupials. There's many of them.
Well, I thought...
wallabies.
Yeah, that's true.
Howling 2 has a lot of funny things in it. And so I thought, go make this next one really satirical. And I thought, mistakenly as it turned out, that if I said it was going to be marsupial werewolves, I could get finance from the Australian Film Board. Mm-hmm. And so I had this... And I just thought it was a funny idea, that marsupial. And I'd seen that film of the marsupial tiger that's at the beginning of the Howling 3. Oh. Have you seen that? It's an extinct.
I don't remember that scene.
It's a black and white. It's a black and white newsreel of a real thing that's extinct species of a striped marsupial wolf.
Oh wow!
And it's the extent. And I just thought that was just a great thing. I thought, what if So that was the idea. Anyway, so I have a meeting with the Australian Film Commission, it was called then, and they say, look, Philippe, we don't really do, horror films, and it's not really Australian. And I said, well, wait a minute. What's more Australian than a woman with a pouch, a marsupial woman? What's more Australian than marsupials? Well, they thought... They didn't have a sense of humor. and by that time, Howling 2 had already made a lot of money. And I was with my partner at the time, Charles Waterstreet, my co-producer. And he said, you know what, this is bullshit. Let's just go to the bank across the street. We literally went into a bank across the street that we'd had an introduction to. And we said, the bank manager guy... said, so what's this about? It was marsupial werewolves. He goes, oh, fantastic.
That's so funny.
And he said, how much has Howling 2 made? And we said, we had the numbers there. And he said, I'll give you the money. It didn't cost much. It was like $1 million, which was pretty cheap. But still, it was just like that. So,
amazing.
I just thought it was funny, marsupial werewolves.
Yeah.
That's basically...
It's wonderful.
That was basically what
And you had a film within a film there. There's a lot of satire going on.
Yeah, and Frank Thring. Yeah. I love Frank Thring. He's the...
Which one's it?
Frank Thring is the Hitchcock director in there.
Right. Yeah.
He's also in Mad Dog.
Yeah, and Barry Otto's before the show started. He's a great Australian actor. I don't think he's been in a lot of maybe American films. Did he ever have much of a career here?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Bliss is a big Cannes winner, and it's about a guy who basically wakes up and goes to hell. But his hell is pretty much like real life, and it's a very surreal,
really good movie. And his daughter, of course, is Miranda Otto, who did have a career here.
Oh, I did not even from Lord of the Rings.
That's Miranda.
I did not even realize
that's Barry's daughter.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's interesting. Yeah. Now, it's a funny film. I mean, seeing it in New Zealand, I guess I saw it at an age where I just didn't understand. Holy shit! Is this like? I didn't know what it was that I was watching, because it's a really bonkers, and the effects are great, and it's just it's one of the strangest movies I've ever seen.
I'm glad to hear that, because when I was seeing movies as a kid, I always liked the strange, weird movies. I liked the movies that didn't quite work. I liked continuity errors and stuff. I was watching for them.
Yeah.
So did you put some in Howling 3 intentionally?
Not intentionally. but I did make a film called Continuity over the last 5 years, which is all about that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so every scene, it's about continuity.
But I will say this about Howling 3, and I don't know if you have any other Howling 3 questions, but the leap from Howling 3 to Communion is just like such a big leap in tone that I'm deeply curious, like how you get a job like that from one film to another, if it has anything to do with each other, because Communion just seems like the super serious film about something that people were really worried about for a period.
And apparently it was very effective at the time, because I remember my mom not letting me watch it, and I was allowed to watch just about everything. And for me not to be allowed to watch it, it played on television.
It was a big book. I mean, right? It was a big bestseller.
The book was number one New York Times bestseller. And I'd known Whitley in London at the time that I was living with Eric Clapton and Martin. So I knew him from before.
Huh.
And so I met him, I guess this was 86 or something. I saw Wolfen, and I was Whitley Strieber, and I wondered whether it was the same guy, because I recognized the name. And I called the publisher, and it was the same guy that I'd known in London. And so we got together for lunch, and we both had careers. And he seemed disturbed. And I said to him, I hope you don't mind, but you seem disturbed. He said, well, you'll just laugh at me if I tell you what's happening. I said, I won't laugh at you. He said, well, you'll laugh at me. I promise I won't. He said, well, I think what's happening, I'm shortening the story. But so he said, well, I've been abducted by little blue guys about this big and other aliens, and I think I've been experimented on. I thought, well, I didn't laugh, because I thought that would have been rude. So I didn't laugh. And he said, "What do you think I should do?" I said, "Well, I think you should get a publisher and get a psychiatrist." And so he did both. And so
so before you even wrote the book, you were
so he was sending me the galleys. So he sent me the galleys, and then I said, we should make a movie out of this. So I had the galleys, and I was going around here, not Burbank, but actually Burbank as well.
So you didn't get the gig; you made the gig.
Exactly.
That's
and so I was, and all the studios hadn't been published. They all turned it down.
Yeah.
And the funniest turn down was from an old friend of mine, actually, David Putnam, who's then running Columbia, and his assistant called me and said, "Oh, look, David wants you to know he's not going to do this because he doesn't believe it."
So he doesn't believe in aliens, so he's not going to do the film?
Well, I said, that's a new one on me. Does he believe in Raiders of the Lost Ark? I mean, since when has truth had anything to do with Hollywood movie? It's just like completely bizarre. Anyway, then the book came out. It was a huge success, which enabled me to raise the money independently.
Oh, wow. So I didn't know
because the studios, it was totally independent, because the studios, after it was a bestseller, there were some studios who wanted to make it, but they wanted to make it straight horror.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to do that, nor did Whitley. And that was the whole thing, because the fact that it's ambiguous, it makes it more horrific. The studios are not into subtlety or anything about ambiguity. Or, they want it black and white. Yeah. So it's got to be a horror film. But the idea that, maybe it's all happening in his head, that's too arty.
Yeah.
That's way too arty. But that's what was happening, and that's what the book was. The strength of the book was that Whitley was saying, I don't know whether this happened or not, which made people believe it more.
Yeah.
It was more believable. So anyway, that's my opinion. So I made it that way. But when you say deadly serious, it had to be deadly serious because it was Whitley's story, and I wanted to honour that. I was his, apart from anything else, I was his mate, and he was obviously really believed it. So I had to honour that. So it was a very difficult film to make because of that, because I wanted to make it as accurate within reason. Now, there's a very funny story. Sure, Whitley wouldn't like me telling it, but he knows I tell it anyway. And I said to Whitley, the anal probe, mate, if we put this in the film, it's just going to follow you around, no pun intended, for the rest of your life. He said, no, that's what happened. I said, well, how big was it? It was about 20 foot long. I said, what? I said, well, okay, look, I'm just saying, you really want me to? He said, yeah. And so I said, well, get an artist. We had a budget, so he got an artist to do the drawings of it. This long snake-like thing, like in the movie, cost us $50,000 to make it. So it's a robot thing,
Yeah.
And but I wanted Whitley to approve it, because So he comes with his wife to the special effects shop, and it takes about 3 guys to carry this thing out, and. His wife answers, Whitley, you never told me it was that big. And Whitley says, it was terrible, man. It was terrible. So anyway, I'm deadly serious to this whole thing, and it was deadly serious, I mean, we're laughing, but it's funny, but it also was serious. Anyway, cut to, Whitley's about to go on the Johnny Carson show, which was the biggest break you could get then to promote a movie, right? You get your key figure on the Johnny Carson show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, if Johnny Carson mentions the anal probe, my career is over again.
Yeah.
And just an eyebrow raised by Johnny Carson, you're dead, right?
Yeah.
So Whitley sits down. Johnny Carson says, best-selling author of Wolf and everything. So Whitley, I hear the aliens gave you an anal probe. I thought, Jesus Christ. And so Whitley looks intensely at Johnny Carson and says, it was terrible, Johnny. It was terrible. And you could see Johnny Carson going, getting out of this real fast. He said, so what was it like working with Christopher Walken?
Yeah.
And so
didn't want to go
it was
down
a very difficult movie to make, but I think a really interesting movie, because really about what is the artistic process, what point does things... is it real? Did it really happen, or didn't it happen? And he turned it into a book.
Did any of that rub off on you in terms of his stories or some of the shadings of detail? Did you ever get to a place where you were questioning whether some of that could be authentic, not just to him or mentally, but to you?
Definitely, absolutely. And I went to the cabin where are you familiar with it pretty much, the story?
Yeah. Oh, I remember.
Well, I went to the cabin before I shot the movie. I went to the cabin to see what it was like, and for a weekend. And Whitley and I were walking out, I'm spooked out anyway. I'm going to make communion. I'm looking around for aliens. And we look up and we see stuff going, like satellite, like things moving in different directions. And Whitley says, I said, look, that's just space junk. And Whitley said, no, look, that don't move like that. Anyway, so I'm getting freaked out more. So I go into the guest room, which is in the movie. I recreated really what I'd experienced that night in that guest room, the spooky stuff. And I had already freaked myself out because of the whole, it's dark out there. And so I put stuff on the bedroom door, just, if the aliens come in the morning when I wake up, I will have seen that they moved this matchbox or whatever I put down there. Then I have this very vivid dream, which very vivid, incredibly vivid dream where light comes in through the window like in the movie. Suddenly I'm outside the room I look outside. There's light coming out of the swimming pool. Anne is running around saying, "Don't wake Andrew, don't wake Andrew," their kid. Whitley's not there. "Don't wake Andrew, don't wake Andrew." Then I'm back in the bed, and then this really old alien face, like the communion face, but really old. It's right over my face, going, "Don't worry, don't worry," and smiling. I wake up next morning, birds are chirping. I look down, nothing's moved at the door. I go out, Whitley's out there with a cup of coffee. He says, "So how was your night?" Like, and I said to him what happened. And he says, "Anne, did you get up in the middle of the night, Anne? Did you see Philippe in the middle of the night?" And she says, "No, I don't remember seeing Philippe, but I did get up. I don't remember much, you know." And I called my wife, Pamela, and I was freaked. Yeah. I was absolutely freaked. To answer your question directly, I was freaked. Yeah. But was I freaked because I was into this movie and it was in my head? Right. Or was I freaked because something happened? Whitley later wrote in another book, another sequel, he wrote that it did happen.
Oh, to him or to you?
To me.
Oh.
But I mean, you know.
So you've had 20-odd foot of grunt too?
Exactly.
Good Russell Crowe reference there.
Yeah. No, exactly. So, yeah.
Well, I've been, as these guys know, and I've been talking on the show about, I've been doing kind of a path back through alien films because it started a couple of months ago where I was like, you know, I liked Dark Skies, which came out last year, and I was like, I can't find any other scary alien films. And so slowly I've been working my way back through. Communion, obviously, is freaky as shit. Now, but the one thing that you guys use kind of the grays, like what became known as like the quintessential gray, like was that Whitley's description or were you pulling from other sources for it?
No, that was Whitley's description in the book.
Wow.
That was Whitley's description.
That's crazy.
Totally.
It's kind of what stuck. Like if we even still now think about aliens, it's that kind of communion gray.
Well, the communion almond eye thing has become the icon of the aliens.
Yeah.
The almond, that icon. And then the thing is why people thought communion was arty was that Whitley had said to me that face was a mask, that's not the real aliens.
Oh.
It was a mask because it looked like a mask. And so
what lay beneath that? Had he
well, there's one, it's in communion, there's one suggestion he made where it was a weird face with a pig snout sort of thing underneath it. But as these stories go on movies, and amusing thing, or maybe not, was in the middle of the film, I started discussing with Whitley about the mask thing. I said, you know what, we should just show that it's a mask, that underneath, we don't know who the real alien is, it's a mask. So he said, okay, that's fine. So I said to one of my assistants, get all the masks from the special effects shop. We'll use them. Get all the masks. We'll show them because there's a scene in the film where I use them. You see all the masks lined up. Mm-hmm. The special effects guy thought he'd been fired and disappeared. We couldn't find him because they got the poor guy. And I said, where is he? Where is he? And we can't find him. His wife doesn't know where he is. What thing? It turned out he was in a bar.
Distraught.
Thought he'd been fired because the director wanted all the masks on the set now. And anyway, so, but if you look at the film closely, you'll see all the masks and you'll see the question raised, what exactly was it? What are we watching?
Did Walken get to know Whitley? Was there a relationship there, or was he basing it on any mannerisms?
No, I know. I made a point of introducing him, and they spent some time with Whitley. Christopher didn't believe any of it.
Yeah.
But, he's a hard-nosed New Yorker.
Yeah.
But he's an actor, and he totally got into who Whitley was. He totally respected Whitley, but he wasn't into the, personally into the alien thing. But it got very, heavy's the wrong word, but Whitley was asked questions by intelligence people. I got interviewed by the Defense Intelligence Agency on a flight from San Antonio to L.A. This guy looked like Robert Redford straight out of Central Casting, and he started off like, "What are you doing in friendly? What were you doing in San Antonio?" And I said, "I was speaking to Whitley Strieber. He just made a film called Communion," and he said, "Oh, Communion, that's the best film ever made about alien abduction." So have you met any aliens? No, I haven't met any aliens. And I said, "If you don't mind me asking, are you a journalist?" Because the way he was asking it sounded like a journalist. He said, "No, sir, I'm from the Defense Intelligence Agency." And he opens his jacket and there's a huge, like, big eagle defense, And I said, I didn't know what to say, but what I said was, "Oh, I didn't know you guys had badges." He said, "Oh, yes, sir, we have badges." And so I had a perfectly pleasant conversation with him. But what he wanted to know was whether it was a hoax or not.
Yeah,
and that was the thing. Our phones were bugged.
Wow, you were like a total security risk.
To nobody, but to absolutely nobody. But so that was all very interesting. And then there was there was a thing about alien abduction suddenly. I mean, we had to change our phone number. People kept calling me, telling me they'd been abducted, by the hundreds.
That was the key movie. I think that was the key cultural shift, that book and that film, like in terms of that becoming. That's when I remember it all blowing up, the idea of abductions and being out in the cabin and being, it's a totally different.
I still remember the standee that they had for the books at Walden Books in my hometown. They had this kind of like we called them standees. I don't know what they were, like the self-standing thing. And it had the alien head up at the top. And that was just what I came to know as aliens.
Yeah,
and
that's right. Well, that was Communion. That was the thing, And that was Whitley's vision of that alien, that mask thing.
So if that's an indie, financed as an independent film, was that a huge success, Because,
as an indie film, absolutely.
Yeah. Because
worldwide.
My memory was that looked like a blockbuster.
Yeah.
It was a blockbuster indie.
And did it go straight to television? Like it played on television? Or did it have like a theatrical run too?
Theatrical.
Okay.
Yeah, New Line distributed theatrical. And then it went to HBO, I think. I've forgotten now.
Who has the rights to it now? Because I know it's been out on DVD.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it still available on DVD?
Yeah, still available on Elite.
Okay, Elite put it out. That's right.
Yeah. I'm dying to rewatch it now after this. It's just one of those films.
Is anyone talked to you about a Blu-ray of it yet? Or
I'm talking now, actually. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Right now.
Right now. Right now.
He's texting as he does this conversation.
Right now.
Oh, great.
I was at a alien abduction convention in Washington, D.C.
Hold on, let's back up. Alien abduction convention.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of aliens, but at convention for alien
in Washington,
abductees.
D.C. And it was like 1,000. I don't know how many there were there. This was 89. And it was and they were all abductees, and they all get, was from sane to insane, okay, the range. And one guy came up to me, friendly at first, and then he suddenly said, "You know what, your film and Whitley Strieber, you're both frauds. It's complete garbage. I don't know, what are you doing?" And I said, "Excuse me, sir, I don't know you. I don't know who you are, but I've got a question for you. How do you know it's a fraud?" And he says, "Because the aliens told me."
The aliens are talking about you.
Well, at least they saw your movie.
Yeah. They did.
And Whitley had a similar. Whitley says he went into, what's the big bookstore in New York on Fifth Avenue?
That would be the Strand.
One of those. Wasn't the Strand. It was another one though, with a name, publisher's name. Anyway.
Macmillan is there.
On Fifth Avenue. This is 89. This is 89. Okay. Anyway, whatever. So Whitley says he went into a store and there was a little guy with a hat, huge glasses. Huge glasses and a trench coat thing, laughing and going, "Oh, it's all wrong, it's all wrong, it's all wrong." And he says, I may have the story slightly incorrectly, but my memory of the story is that he went up to the guy, or his publisher did. It wasn't Whitley, it was his publisher. And the guy took his glasses off and it was the alien. It was an alien.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I believe. I mean, also the biggest direct influence culturally, I think, is the tone of that really then goes on to X-Files.
Yes.
I think there's a direct correlation between those two. It feels like Communion's like the backstory of X-Files, of Fox
Well,
Mulder
the first episodes of X-Files are directly Communion shots.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Shot for shot.
Is very similar.
The style of, that was aggravating.
Yeah, you should have gotten to direct some of those. That would have been great.
That's aggravating, yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, that happens.
You still get these great stories.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever thought about doing more genre stuff, or did you feel like you outgrew it, or were you ever even into that stuff, or was it more just fun to make them as a filmmaker?
I definitely will do more.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to separate. I don't really think of it as genre or this or that. I really think of it as what could be really interesting to do.
Yeah, story.
The thing is, even a tiny film takes at least a year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you've got to be interested in it. You've got to find something in it that's interesting. But I think I've talked about this with Rob. It's incredible how so-called genre films have legs and grow and grow and grow, as opposed to straight dramas that don't. The studios endlessly make these huge budget, boring dramas,
Mm-hmm.
and that no one's ever heard of 10 years later. But the low budget genre film, they grow and grow and grow and grow. It's really interesting.
Well, it's because you can also say something and entertain people. So like Possession, my love of that movie, Possession, I don't know if you've seen that one with Sam Neill. I talk about a lot, but really it's Kramer versus Kramer in a monster movie.
Yeah.
So you could watch Kramer versus Kramer again, or you could watch Possession. And you're going to probably rather watch Possession again than Kramer. And I think a lot of horror has that. Larry Cohen has so much satire in his movies. You go back and watch, you can watch them again. They're saying something, but they're also subversive.
There's something
in a way
about the genre that kind of just develops a cult phenomenon and I've read many, many different theories on what it is about why we have, possession and things like that.
Why we have podcasts devoted to a genre or whatever.
Why we see, horror conventions, but you don't have like a Kramer versus Kramer or a Terms of Endearment Con 2015.
There's no drama con. There's no romantic comedy con. It's
very interesting. I mean, the original Frankenstein, fantastic movie. Bride of Frankenstein, fantastic movie, and Dracula, the original movies.
Well, I mean, those icons in creature film, friends of ours have creature tattoos all over their bodies. You realize these icons haven't gone away, and that's 80 years.
It's amazing.
It's pretty astounding, I was just watching that Francis Ford Coppola interview on the El Rey thing, and he's talking about Dracula. His Dracula, which is just a gorgeous movie.
I like his Dracula
it's stunning.
a lot.
I think it's one of the last great studio kind of pictures of that drama. But how he fired his entire effects team halfway through the shoot because he wanted to go back to all the old plate type stuff. And so he hired his son who didn't even really know how to do it. And they just figured it out. But it's amazing. He was really trying to shoot it like the old movies and like the technology. I think he said with the technology they would have had when Bram Stoker was writing Dracula.
Well, there are those great scenes in that film, in the black and white the hand crank stuff.
Yeah,
it's
really
cool.
Experimental film.
Very cool.
Everything except Keanu.
A film that broke all taboos and crossed all boundaries and still a classic in my mind is Freaks.
Oh yeah.
And that was banned all over the world. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because the Frankenstein and Dracula were huge hits at the time. And Irving Thalberg, I don't know whether you know the story behind Freaks, but
I have read a book about it, I don't remember.
Irving Thalberg said to Todd Browning, have you got anything really horrible? Because people like horror. And something really shocking. And that was Freaks. Yeah. And they advertised for Freaks. It's politically incorrect to call them freaks now. But they advertised for, you can't even say pinheads, all these words are taboo now, but they advertised for them all across the United States. And there were literally trainloads of freaks arriving
in. Movie about the making of that.
And the stars were coming into MGM Studios at Culver City, and there was one famous star, I don't know what her name was now, I've forgotten who the name was, but she complained to her, she said, I can't work, because I had Lee's lineup of all these people outside the studio every morning. She said, I can't work with this, so they had to put up this huge tent outside the studio where they had to go inside the tent before they could come in and everything.
Oh, wow.
But what an incredible film.
That one guy, Prince, the small black guy with no arms, no legs, and then he lights the cigarette.
The human cigarette is
what
he used to be billed
He was a
as.
real prince, right?
Yeah.
Or he's the stories were that he was a prince from some, I don't know if it was an African colony.
But he made rolled his own with his tongue.
Rolled his own cigarette. I mean, I don't know. That movie is like one of the more haunting visions you can ever see. But also has a great, the comeuppance is great, because you're on their side.
The concept.
That's what's so cool about that movie.
Yeah.
It's
so humanitarian. It's all
he's
about,
a great director.
Yeah.
I mean, the other stuff he made with Lon Chaney's equally, the
fantastic.
Unholy is a great movie.
Well, speaking about other subjects that you can put into genre,
right.
The original Wolfman was written by Kurt Schordmack, whose brother was Robert Schordmack, the director. But Kurt Schordmack was a Jew on the run from the Nazis. And he gave an interview before he died saying Wolfman is about being a Jew in Nazi Germany, where the mob is coming after you and you don't know why. It's completely irrational. And that's why the Wolfman's so human. He doesn't know why. There's all these shots in that movie about when he's in front of the mirror and he's in agony because he doesn't know why it's all happening.
That's fascinating.
And that came from Kurt Schordmack fleeing Nazi Germany. That horror and the humanity and the mixture of why. It's just fascinating. And he said that's exactly what the movie was about.
Yeah, and when those things slip into movies, that's when they become unforgettable in a sense. Yeah. And you don't even need to know consciously what it is. You just know something is in
there. Another thing going on.
Yeah.
But if you Google
that's
Kurt Schordmack for the interview, it's a fabulous, very interesting interview.
Yeah. Well, some Nazis were called werewolves, right? I mean, there were certain groups of them that were labeled the werewolves.
Hitler's nickname was Wolf. That was he'd have fetish about wolves, Hitler. So all he had the wolf's lair and the wolf this and the wolf that and the wolf, that was just a Hitler fetish.
It's wild. I get the feeling we have to do follow-ups where we just bring in history and
Do you still keep up with the genre? I mean, I know you keep up with movies in general, but do you still keep up with things in the genre? Are there things that still scare or surprise you when it comes to horror stuff?
No.
Now he will.
I keep up, but I'm not. There's nothing that's
nothing surprising you at this point.
I don't like the torture porn thing.
Yeah. None of us do. Really.
It's like what? I mean, is that you're that desperate? I mean, I just don't go for it.
Yeah,
the torture porn.
We don't like it either.
Yeah, it's not that interesting.
I have some that I tolerate, but for the most part, kind of boring.
It's strange.
Yeah,
it's desperate.
Well, I mean, all your films have it, and there's something we talk about all the time, which are great practical effects that no matter how silly, you somehow always are there with it watching it. Whereas if that same effect was CG and it was a little cleaner,
you just takes you out.
You just don't.
I think CGI has had its day, really. Well, it hasn't had its day. It's animation.
Yeah.
It's not movies. It's animation.
Yeah.
I mean, even when it's well done, Harry Potter, the man turning into a werewolf, it's well done, but it's not. It's animation.
Yeah.
It's just different.
I mean, the Wolfman remake, the biggest disappointment is not getting to see Rick Baker do a transformation.
Yeah.
It's on the behind the scenes. Like you see him test footage of his own camera.
So what happened? They just didn't use it?
They just didn't want to. They just wanted to do it CG.
Yeah.
Well, the big one was The Thing, right? The remake of The
Thing.
Thing.
The Thing was just painful because
they actually shot it.
I interviewed those guys on the red carpet because they still had Tom Woodrow. It was ADI did the effects, and they still had them come through the red carpet and everything. And while on the red carpet, they're still talking about how none of our stuff's in the movie.
It all got replaced. So they had shot it all practically, and then once it got to post, they just redid it all.
And then they ended up using the stuff that the ADI guys had created in
trailers.
In the haunted house. They made a universal thing on the house. So all the creatures that you were looking at in there were the things that they'd created.
Yeah, there's a disconnect between the fans of the genre and the people creating sometimes. And the creator, some of the producers don't realize that that's what we want.
Yeah.
But it's good, it'll happen.
It'll come back.
Yeah.
It'll definitely will come back.
Yeah, it's fairly timeless.
It's like even vinyl's coming back.
Yep.
Did you have any, from going back to even childhood or even just films you've seen during the period, just any horror films that you had seen that you really stuck with you in your life, or anything, like were the key classics? Was it the Universal films or?
Well, definitely those Universal films, all of them.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing a movie that freaked me out, in Blood of a Poet by Jean Cocteau, where the people walking upside down on the ceiling. Yes. Seeing that as a kid, surrealism and horror, I think there's a close connection between surrealism and horror.
We'll go to Incendentally with the cutting of an eyeball. It's, the first slasher.
The first slasher, for sure. Yeah, the slashing of the eyeball in Le Chien Andalou, fantastic. Mm-hmm. That's still powerful, still freaks people out. So I like the classics. I liked The Exorcist when it came out, but seeing it again and again over the years, it's lost a little bit of the luster.
I always wonder if it's because religion has lessened, It was, what I mean? They're kind of, it came out at a time where people, Catholicism, all these things are still kind of, people believed, and now it just feels like.
Well, definitely that. Definitely that's a factor, but the effects have been, since then there's been so much done. But when Linda Blair's head turned around, I saw that movie in New York in the, I saw 2 or 3 people were throwing up.
Yeah.
Because they thought it was real.
Yeah.
But we don't think it's real anymore.
Yeah, that's part of it.
But when it was powerful, it was well done. I nearly used Jason Miller in Mad Dog, but I ended up
with Dennis.
With Dennis, yeah.
Did you see any of those other big classics like Texas Chainsaw or any when they first came out? We always love hearing people's first reaction to movies that we grew up after years of them already being out.
That we knew were classic.
When you sit in the movie theater, you don't know what it's going to be.
Right.
Which is an amazing thing, but...
I liked that one.
That was good. Good film.
Good
film. One that not very graphic, but was pretty good was The Haunting, directed by Robert Wise.
Great film.
Editor,
yeah, he edited Citizen Kane.
Yeah. And Magnificent Ambersons.
Yeah, well,
he took out.
Yeah, well, under instruction with a gun to his head, apparently.
I know. Yeah.
And the French film. I think the Diabolique.
Diabolique, definitely.
That's a great one.
The director of Wages of Fear.
Yeah, Clouseau.
Yeah.
Clouseau.
That's one of the best endings. If people haven't seen it, we won't talk about it because that's just one of the best endings you'll ever see.
Yeah, fantastic.
Terrifying for,
No, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Criterion.
And then,
Criterion.
I have to say Psycho's masterpiece.
Yep.
Which really set the standard, changed cinema.
We did. Now, is that when you saw her in the theater before you knew what it was?
Yeah.
What was that moment like when she's killed in the shower? Was it just shocking to see your lead actor pulled out of the story? Or did you see it coming?
No, I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
No, what was amazing is that you didn't see it coming because she was the lead actress.
That's right.
20 minutes in, she's murdered. That was Hitchcock's brilliance.
Yeah,
just that
amazing.
Just doing that. Mm-hmm. But he couldn't get the studio didn't want to do it. The whole story of the making of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I had to get the money himself. Oh, did you? Well, it's incredible.
Had I known, I'd have to bring you one.
And then I'd love to see it. And I'd love to see that. And Saul Bass was very important in that too. The design of the shower sequence and all of that.
Yeah, they storyboarded the whole thing.
Yeah,
to show how it was going to be cut.
Yeah. But it's incredible the studio. Even after Hitchcock had made so many masterpieces that they wouldn't back him.
Doesn't matter.
That's scandalous.
Well, and then he had one more after that. That crazy. It's only kind of pictures are only surfacing the last couple of years, but it was like I think it was before or right after Frenzy, but it was him pushing it even further, and it was like a lot of nude woman being strangled and killed.
Well, that's Frenzy.
No, but there was another one. I think it was called Kaleidoscope, and it never got made. Oh. And that was him really trying to, because I think he was trying to be of the time, right? Like he didn't want to just be old.
He wanted to be trendy.
Yeah, and so he was going to
do all the things they'd never let him do. Never let him do.
But I think it wouldn't have worked because I think his where his talent is in the repressed.
Yeah.
And then just he's repressed. He's living within himself, and he lets these lashes out in these ways.
Repulsion, I think, was a great movie.
Yeah.
Creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to the more.
Are you living in London when that came out? Because that's a London horror film.
Yeah. I tend to the more more ambiguous, not the sort of straight up.
Yep. That's my bag too. I see. I would like to. Maybe we can take you to It Follows. She might not agree, but It Follows is the only modern horror film that I've seen where I kind of had that feeling of seeing something at the first part where it will be remembered, and the feeling of seeing it is really creepy. I think it will have that effect.
The opening scene is fucking awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole film will have that effect on people. I really believe it.
It's called It Follows.
It Follows.
Time will judge my comments right now.
And I still say, best jump scares of the year.
Yeah.
It's a very repetitive film.
But then, I mean, Halloween's a repetitive film. A lot of movies are repetitive. Horror has a pattern of repetition. Doesn't have to be a negative. That's all I'm saying. But watch it for yourself. we get along with our movie taste all the time. We'll argue about this later. But I would like to take you just to see, as somebody who's seen these other movies. It'd be interesting if we took you just to see what you think about some of these effects, or if it's just all worn to you. I'd be curious.
A lot of it depends on how old you are when you see the movie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
There was a movie. Most frightening thing I've ever seen in my life was a movie called The Mole People.
Oh, yeah.
But I was like 6 or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was like 7 or 8 or something. And my father had to take me out of the cinema. I was screaming. So,
well, Mole People. Snow White for most people. The first Snow White, I watched it with my 3.5-year-old this last weekend with a friend of ours on 16mm. He strung it up, and his 3.5-year-old ran out of the room in about 5 minutes and wouldn't come back in. And nothing particular. The mirror, I think. I think it was the mirror.
The witch, yeah.
But my son was fascinated scary. And wouldn't leave and wouldn't walk out. He wanted to see it. And once the witch, he was scared, but I just thought it was really interesting because I think a lot. And Kenneth Anger, when we met him, the one thing he said is that was the most influential film on him. Wow. Seeing at a young age, because there is so much dreamy, surreal stuff in that.
Mine was Fantasia, because I saw Fantasia like super, super young.
It's an intense film.
And the Night on Bald Mountain sequence, I remember my parents taking me out of the theater for that. And then I wanted to go back in and keep watching it, but they definitely had to leave and come back.
The Wizard of Oz, the flying monkeys, was scary.
Well, look at David Lynch. I mean, every movie he's made has been influenced by Wizard. I see Wizard of Oz in every one of his films. Mulholland Drive is just Wizard of Oz to me, set in L.A.
Oh, I always think that
it's just so big.
Sailor and Lunar. Yeah.
I mean, that literally shows the imagery of the feet. But it's really fascinating when you do see those early childhood. You're right. I
think it's when you're a kid, it imprints.
Yeah.
Because
I'm jaded. I know I'm jaded now. I mean, I know I'm looking. It's very hard for me to see a movie as I did when I was a kid.
Well, I think that's why our generation's so nostalgic.
We were talking about TV on the way here, and I was trying to describe to him things happening on Hannibal. Hannibal kind of pushes like, well, tell me something that's happening on that.
Yeah, you would hardly believe that they could get away with some of that. Some of it's like you're saying, talking about surrealism and horror. The one where they look down at the eye and there's all the bodies.
Oh God!
He gets. I mean, it's a beautiful, like artistically beautiful. I think there's like 100 or 50 bodies, naked bodies, arranged in a perfect circle to kind of be
sewn together
that you can only look at from the top of like a barn.
Yeah, to look like an eye.
To look like an eye, and you look at it, and they've actually done it for the movie.
Cannibal. What's it called? The Cannibal Apocalypse.
Oh, Holocaust.
Holocaust. Yeah, that's pretty. That's pretty outrageous. That's pretty outrageous.
Yeah. We were talking about that last week.
That's pretty.
Yeah,
that's pretty.
Did you see that one in the theaters?
No.
When it came out.
He's gonna skip the cannibal movies.
Yeah.
That's
either way, that's been pretty wild. So will the Blu-ray of Howling 2 be coming out soon? Or
I think it's in the summer. There's no.
Yeah, it's soonish. I mean,
it's in the works.
Yeah. Okay. Who's putting it out?
Scream Factory's putting it out.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
and they already put out The Beast Within.
Does Sybil do a commentary?
Not yet.
Okay. There you go. I want to host that. I'm offering my services now.
There you go. Thank you so much, Philippe, for coming.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So much fun.
Super fun night.
I like pontificating.
Have you got anything we should be looking out for? What are you working on right now? Horror or not horror?
Well, this is horror, but it's real. This is a movie called 3 Days in Auschwitz. It's a historical documentary.
Okay, cool.
I've been back there 3 times over the last 5 years filming.
Yeah.
So it's the history of it and what it was, what it means now. And they're finding out more and more stuff about it. It's incredible. Actually, in 2013, they discovered 40,000 more Nazi concentration camps. 40,000.
Wow. Oh, my God. Wow.
We don't know what happened. It's just tip of the iceberg.
Huh. Wow. So you're discovering. So it's not like a pre-written documentary. You're actually discovering things as you're making it.
It's taken 5. I've been working on it for 5 years.
Okay. Wow.
And trying to get it out of the house.
Ever see Night and Fog?
Fantastic.
Yeah, Alan Ray.
Greatest.
Sure. If you have 30 minutes, one of the most
Powerful.
It could change the whole world if everyone had to see that film.
Yeah.
About what a human is, just a body, and what there's a part where their head is in a casing dissected, and you see the side of the brain. You realize this is like one of their experiments, and you're just like, you just can't believe people could be treated like that.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
So my movie goes into the history of all of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great.
And then I got to do a comedy.
Yeah. We have to end with a one-liner. We need a singer.
Yeah.
A
big singer.
Let's leave with a howl. Howl.
And howl.
Yeah, there you go.
Your sister's a werewolf.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Your sister's a werewolf. Okay, thanks, man.
Thanks.